Hi, I'm Tara Newell, and I survived being attacked by Dirty John Meehan, killing him in self-defense.
I'm Collier Landry. At 11 years old, I survived my father, Dr. John F. Boyle Jr., murdering my mother. I testified against him in court, sealing his fate. We've come together to interview fellow true crime survivors.
Our goal is to give survivors back their power
by helping them tell their story, their way.
Our show, The Survivor Squad, will be launching soon.
In the meantime, head to our website, thesurvivorsquad.com,
to sign up for updates, send us your suggestions,
and connect with us on social media.
Thanks for listening,
and we look forward to sharing more ethical true crime content with you guys soon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday afternoon. I know you could be out enjoying the extra warm weather, but we appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with us. We're hoping to have an interactive conversation. We're going to do some talking at first, but then at the end, we'll have some Q&A. So if you have questions, please do not be shy to ask them. There are some questions that may not be able to be answered, especially with Miss Evidence. I'm going to introduce her in a minute. She's going through a case right now. So there may be some sensitive things that she may not be able to answer. So she may tell you that, and please just respect that. And I might put Miss Jane Hunter on the spot a couple of times. So if she doesn't know the answer, don't be mad at her. It's probably my fault. My name is Carter-Landin. I'm the host and executive producer of True Consequences podcast. I created the show to advocate for my brother's case as well as other cases in my community in New Mexico that need justice. Been doing that for about 3.5 years now, and really just trying to help elevate things in my state, make some changes, and hopefully bring some awareness to cases that aren't well known. I want to introduce Evidence here. Evidence is joining me. Evidence, do you want to say a little bit about yourself and why you're here?
Hello, everyone. I'm Evidence, Richard Okorogheye's mother, the 19 years old boy that passed away 2 years ago now in Epping Forest, was found in a lake, still fighting for justice for him. And we also have CIC that we're raising sickle cell awareness because apparently the police didn't know what sickle cell is all about. So that's what we're doing, a lot of promotion, working with the missing people as well to make some changes as well, because we need changes in our community. We need to be safe. And that's what we want to do. And that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. We were supposed to be joined by Dominic Norton from Black Missing People, or the Black Missing Charity, but he was unable to make it, unfortunately, due to some circumstances. Want to just acknowledge that he's not here. We do want to have as many diverse voices here and diverse organizations to help highlight these issues. But we are joined today by Jane Hunter from Missing People Charity. Do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Hunter. I work in the research team at Missing People, and we've been doing a lot of work recently to explore the experiences of different ethnic minority communities in relation to missing. And we're trying to work with families such as Evidence and other organizations to improve the response by all sorts of different agencies to different missing people and their families.
Thank you, Jane. And I'm not going to take credit for these stats. These came from Jane, but I'm going to be the one telling them to you. Black people are overrepresented in the missing population of missing people in the UK. So 13% of missing people compared to 4% of the general population. Data suggests that a poorer response for Black people and people of other minority ethnic communities, when people go missing for longer, they're less likely to be found by the police and less likely to have more risks and vulnerabilities. They've heard from families and missing people about the poor response that they receive from the police. So as we go into this and we talk specifically about what it's like to have somebody in your family go missing that is either Black or another ethnic minority, we wanted to have Evidence take a moment to tell a little bit about her story and her son and what happened. And so, Evidence, if you want, as much as you want to share, if you can just share a little bit about what happened and what the police response was, and then what was the result of their lack of response.
My son, Richard, I work night shifts. I do night. I'm a staff nurse by profession. So I went to work as normal. There's nothing wrong with him. I said, I'm going to work. He said, okay, mommy, I love you. I said, I love you too. Very positive. He's a perfect child. Every child is a perfect child to every parent, isn't it? I went to work and I remember calling Richard and around that 10, which I promised that I usually do. He didn't answer his calls. I thought, okay, it's normal. He'll call me back. He didn't. I got busy. In the morning, I came back. I cooked his favorite foods and kept it aside, folded his clothes and kept it aside for him. Then I took a shower, went to rest because he doesn't usually like to be disturbed. So I woke up and the food was still there. The clothes was there. He hasn't collected it. So I called his line normally because he locks his door. He's a teenager. He's a big boy, so they like privacy. So he didn't answer. So I knocked on his door. He didn't answer. So I forced my way in and he wasn't in. So I went straight to his friend because he did tell me he was going to his friend's house, which I trusted. And I was told that his friend wasn't there and Richard didn't come to the house. I said, okay. So immediately I got panicked, called the police. And I told them I was stressed. I said, listen, my son is gone missing. It's unusual for him to leave home. And he hasn't returned back. And they said, okay, he's a grown-up adult. He will come back whenever he's ready. So I said, listen, my son he's got a health condition. He's got sickle cell. So that was completely dismissed. And they asked me, the first thing they said to me, he's not known on the register. He's not known on the system. And I said, my son can't be known on the system because he's a good boy. He's gone out somewhere. I'm worried as a parent. And basically, just to cut the long story short, I was dismissed completely, which was very sad. I kept calling and they didn't do anything about it. I remember walking bare feet from my home, going to Labo Grove, crying on his street, asking and begging for help. Over the phone, I was begging for help. I said, look for my son. Something has happened to my son. Please help me. And they said to me, I remember one of them said to me, Evidence, you just called a few minutes ago. There's no information about your son. He will come back whenever he feels like. He's an adult. No, this is unusual. My son doesn't just go off and not come back. He's my baby. This is not happening. So I explained over and over again. They didn't listen to me until how many days later they decided, oh, okay. The GP called. GP said, listen, Richard has sickle cell. They didn't take it serious. The MP called, said the same thing. People called the police. They didn't act at all. When they acted, it was obviously too late. Richard was found, fortunately, dead in Epping Forest Lake. And I know they came out to apologize because they failed me completely. They know they failed me. And as a parent, I'm here today to just stress out to them, if they can hear me, to police, that this shouldn't be happened. The colors doesn't matter. When a parents call and tell the police, my child is missing, they should act quickly. We all know our children. But my case was completely different, I suppose because Richard was black. And in our society, we need to be safe. Our children need to be safe. For what happened to me, I don't think, it's happening recently. We had an issue as well recently that a 21 years old man got missing and he was found apparently dead as well by Dover, I remember. You wonder how quickly the police acting. They need to act quickly to save. Color should not come into it. So they've actually apologized to me and I did not accept the apology because I need something done. We need changes in our community, in our society done. And this is what we're here for. I don't want to talk too much because the story is so long. And obviously we're still going through a lot of court cases at the moment with the police. But until then, yeah.
I just want to thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing. I know this was not easy for you. Yeah. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart. And hopefully everybody else feels the same way for sharing your pain with us, because it's important for us to hear this. These kinds of issues, we cannot hope to fix them if we're not willing to face them. And we can't face them without hearing about them. So thank you so much. You're doing an amazing job. A lot of the reason why this is coming up is because there was a report that was created. I believe Missing People is the organization that created the report that highlights some of the issues facing people with other ethnicities in the UK that go missing, and the families and what they have to deal with, and how they're left having to pick up the pieces or beg people to take them seriously, which should never happen. Should never happen anywhere. Jane, do you want to talk a little bit about some similar experiences that you've heard from other families relating to this?
Yeah, at Missing People Charity, we run lots of frontline services and support lots of people who've been missing, and also lots of families who have a missing loved one. And through the support services where we support families, over recent years, we've been increasingly hearing from people about the fact that they feel like the police haven't taken their concerns seriously, and that has been linked to their ethnicity. So we've heard that from all stages of missing investigations, at the point of reporting, similarly to evidences, experiences of people feeling that the police haven't taken risks seriously, that they haven't accepted that person's missing. Things like, I think what evidence heard them saying, oh, they'll probably come back, don't worry about it. Not recognising things around specific vulnerabilities. But that really early stage of the actual making the report of that person as being missing, right through to the actual investigation. Maybe the risk assessment processes being felt not to be done in a way that actually accurately reflects risk, which then means that somebody's case might be risk assessed at a lower level than you might anticipate. And that then has a knock-on impact on the resources that are then given to an investigation. So if a risk assessment decision is made and a low risk level is given, then there's only relatively limited steps that can be taken by police forces in order to then investigate that case, that episode. So it's really important that those risks are identified and recognised as early as possible. And then going through, we've heard that steps haven't been taken. So things like not looking at CCTV, families feeling that they need to go out and look themselves, that sort of thing. So really from start to finish, hearing really poor responses, and that being really clearly to be felt to be linked to either the person, the reporting person, or the missing person's ethnicity. So we've heard that over recent years, and that sort of resulted in us doing a bigger piece of work about discrimination and unequal treatment linked to people's ethnicities. So really worrying things coming up through that from families.
So I know that recently Missing People published a report with some really interesting findings, some very difficult findings. What spurred Missing People to look into this? And can you talk a little bit about the report?
Yeah, the work that we'd done previously over the last few years, that was hearing from people through our frontline services who had maybe disclosed things to their support worker, to their family support worker, and those were linked to specific cases, specific people. And I think we've had a feeling that can be, unfortunately, slightly dismissed by people because it shows individual circumstances, but it might not necessarily show a pattern. And in order to try and create like real systemic change, often people do need to or want to see that bigger, high-level data side of things. And there really wasn't very much about missing. There's not very much about missing in general, but there was certainly next to nothing about missing an ethnicity. So what we did was we collected information from police forces across the whole of the UK, so England, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. And basically we got data that showed that across the whole country, there are real significant disparities in terms of missing and the response to missing, depending on people's ethnicities. So as was already said at the start, we found that there's a real disproportionality specifically for Black people. So in the UK, 4% of the population is Black, but 13% of all missing people are Black. So there's a real disproportionality there. But we also found real concerning findings at the point when somebody is missing. So we found that Black people, so adults and children, are more likely to be missing for more than 48 hours and for more than a week than white missing people. We found that Black people were less likely to be found by the police. So much smaller proportions of Black missing people actually being found by the police compared to white people. And we also found that it was much less likely for risk factors to be identified. So really low proportions of things like mental health, exploitation, sexual exploitation being identified for Black missing people compared to white missing people. So a combination of all of those things, every single data point we looked at, the response to Black missing people was worse than the response to white missing people. And that was a sort of national picture piece of work. So that sort of combined with the personal experiences of people like Evidence and other families that we've heard from is really concerning.
Can you talk a little bit more about the broader concept of missing in the UK and what it looks like?
Yep. So it might surprise people in this room. It might not. But I think missing is a far more sort of pervasive issue in the UK than might typically be considered. So every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing in the UK. And I should have calculated what that meant for the time that we're sitting here. But I think that means that probably around 25 to 30 people will be reported missing just in the time that we're sitting in this room today. So it's a real significant issue. People go missing more than once. So about 170,000 people go missing every year, but that's in 350,000 missing incidents. So it's a really big issue. People go missing linked to all sorts of different things. So big links to things like mental health, exploitation, people just needing a break. And sometimes really we don't know why people go missing. I think the nature of the issue is that someone goes missing, and particularly if they don't return or if sadly they're found to have died while they're missing, it can be really awful because families just don't know why that person went missing or what happened while they were away. So it's a significant issue in this country, which I think is quite hidden at the moment. It's not as known about as you might expect.
So as we look at that and we think about the number of people going missing, can you talk a little bit more about why people go missing? Because that's a lot of people. If we're talking about 25 to 30 people going missing just in this 45-minute time period, why are they going missing?
Yeah, there's a whole host of reasons why people go missing. One of my colleagues, this will only make sense to people who are from the UK, but one of my colleagues refers to missing as the Clapham Junction of social issues. So Clapham Junction is one of the biggest train stations in the UK in London. It's got train lines all over the place going everywhere in the UK. And that really is what missing is. So any social issue that you can think of, there'll be some form of link with missing. The most common things that we typically hear about are mental health. And that sort of ranges from things around anxiety, people feeling overwhelmed, all the way to things like people who might be feeling suicidal, linked to self-harm, things like that. There's significant links with exploitation, particularly for young people. People go missing linked to criminal exploitation. So things like county lines, drugs exploitation linked to gangs, also sexual exploitation. On the less serious sounding issues, although missing is a really serious issue, a lot of people go missing because they're not happy where they are. So we hear often from young people that they're not happy where they're living, they're not happy at school. Children who live in the care system often go missing because they want to go back to their families, they want to go back to their friends, they've been moved somewhere that they're not happy with. So that's a sort of significant issue for young people. But yeah, almost any social issue you can think of, really, there's some link with missing.
Evidence, I'm going to come back to you really quickly. Can you just talk with the audience a little bit about the impact that your son's disappearance has had on you and your family?
Basically, it's a big hole, isn't it? Richard was the only child that I have, so he's the only. So he has left. I've kept his room the same, but he has left a massive hole, empty. And the life doesn't seem the same anymore. Even in our community, those who know him, his friends. But saying that as well, he has also changed the way people think as well. The teenagers and especially his friends parents are more attentive to listen more. Not that I wasn't listening. I don't think Richard went because I wasn't listening. Of course, we're best friends and all that. Something must have happened. I don't know. Somebody must have asked him to meet him rather somewhere. But the community at large, they've missed Richard. Family missed Richard. They talk about him every day. And, this, like I said, also more lovers at the same time. The police are also making a little bit more efforts now to go out and do things. Suppose when parents are reporting, they're also more keen, a little bit. I could see some slight change-ish. I want more. I want to see more of that. We want more changes. But Richard has left there's a lot of emptiness in my life. And I think is something that I need to live with. I don't want to live with it, but I have no choice. And I suppose his friends have no choice but to accept that. It's the reality of life, really. But like I said, but I would like justice, and I like changes, because his death, there's no way his death will go in vain. He needs to change. He has to change something.
Yeah.
Changes in our community and society and the way the police operate, basically.
I just have to say, I'm so inspired by you and any family member who's out there trying to make the best out of the worst situation possible, the worst possible scenario, and trying to change things in your community and in your country and in your circle. I just think it's really inspiring. And I know it doesn't do anything to take away the pain, but I see you and I know what it's like to fight for justice for a loved one. And my heart goes out to you and your family.
Thank you very much.
Jane, let me just pull up my notes real quick. Can you elaborate more on some of the anecdotal experiences that you've seen when families are left with that disappearance of their loved one?
Yeah, so the families who we support missing is just absolutely a horrendous thing for those families to experience. So they say that the type of loss that you experience when someone is missing is the worst form of loss that you can experience. So for long-term missing people, there's something that families experience which is called ambiguous loss. And it reflects the fact that for missing people, the families and the people who are left behind, they sometimes literally do not know anything about what has happened to their missing loved one. So they don't know why they went missing. They don't know where they are. They don't know if they're going to come back. And people get stuck where they were at the point when their loved one went missing. So when somebody dies, people can move through the different stages of grief. But what happens when somebody is missing is that people cannot move through those stages of grief and they get stuck in this real ambiguity. And the charity supports people who have had a missing loved one for years, decades, a really long time. And their life just gets stuck at the point that they were in when their loved one went missing. So things like they don't want to go away for the weekend, they don't want to go on holiday, they don't want to move, things like that, because that might be the time that the person comes back. Practical things, which I know I certainly would never have thought about until I worked in this sector. Financial things, like the missing person might have direct debits, might have a mortgage, might have all of these things that you would never think about. And the families can't do anything about that because they don't have control over the finances and things like that. Although there's now legislation which has changed that, but very difficult for family members. And yeah, just awful. And then obviously the horrendous situation, like evidence was in where people are missing and then are found to have died while missing. Just awful situations.
So I know we've gone to a really kind of sad place with this, so I don't want to leave you all feeling like everything is dismal and hopeless. I think that there is hope. I think the fact that you're here listening to this creates some hope, right? Because people are interested, they want to know what's going on. But I want to kind of round this out a little bit with some conversation about the need to leverage resources, what can be done, what should be done, and maybe what do you think is not the best route to go with this type of situation? I know it's kind of a vague question, but I want to kind of just loop that in and then we'll open it up to Q&A afterwards.
Yeah, in terms of the different responses that people from different ethnic minority communities might get when their loved one goes missing, I think from the charity's perspective and from Evidence's perspective and other families, we're really keen that individual police forces and individual areas really meaningfully look at what is happening in their area. So really look at the data, but also the cases that are happening in their area. And if it is shown that there is different responses in those areas, which we know that there are in a lot of areas, really looking at why that is, looking at if there are things like bias, discrimination, if there are different decisions being made based on people's ethnicity, and actually taking meaningful steps to address that. And I think positively, police forces do feel really receptive to that. And nationally, there's a police race action plan. We have heard from police forces that they are keen to do that. So we're really hopeful that there are steps being taken towards that. And then I think a bigger picture in terms of responses to missing, there is increasingly better acceptance of the fact that actually the police aren't necessarily the best people to respond to a lot of the issues around missing. So things like mental health, things like young people being unhappy at home, that's not really anything that the police can have any meaningful impact on. So we're doing quite a lot of work to work with people like the NHS, mental health care providers, local authorities, lots of different agencies across the country to try and get other people to step forward and to work better together to make sure that the reason why someone went missing is actually being addressed so that they can get help at the point that they need it. So I think there's scope for some hopefulness within a really difficult situation.
Do you want to add anything to that evidence of what you'd like to see changed in the UK?
Yeah. As you mentioned already, more better response, and not just when they said, okay, they've got a target to meet, but we want to actually follow it up. Have they actually met the target, the plans, those plans that they put in place already? We want to see the changes. So we need to follow it up, don't we, to make sure that they've actually achieved what they said they will achieve to make our community a better place.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for us here? I'll start with you. Right. So I'm going to rephrase that just so the people that maybe didn't hear it, or for the people listening on the recording. So she's asking if, I think this is for Jane, if she's seen any difference in response when, let's say, a mixed race parent or a mixed race child, and let's say that the parent is darker than the child, would they take that parent less seriously because of the parent's appearance, even if the child was lighter skinned?
Yeah, it's really difficult to know. I mean, I would hope not. All of the work that we're trying to do at the moment is to try and make sure that wouldn't happen at all. I think one of the things that we come up against is that sort of unconscious bias side of things. And yeah, I really don't know how that would affect any sort of decision making. I would hope it wouldn't. The one thing I think that we are really keen to get across is it does sound really scary what we're talking about, and the research that we've published, we appreciate the effect that it might have on communities who might be affected by the response that we're talking about. The main thing that I would say is don't not report, don't not go to the police because you're worried about it. Our hope would be that there wouldn't be any sort of different response and that you would get the response that you deserve. So I would definitely say go to the police. I would also say one of the things that we are really keen to get across is that people are really clear with the police about the situation that they're in, or that their child's in, that their loved one is in if they do go missing, and making sure that any risks and vulnerabilities are put across to the police really clearly. And that if you don't feel like you're getting the response, that there are people like the Missing People charity. We are there to help advocate for you, and we can work with police forces. So if you were ever to be in that situation and you don't feel like you're getting that response, get in touch with somebody like Missing People and we can help to do that. But we definitely don't want to be like scaremongery with this. And we're really keen that actually having something like this out there just has an impact on making the police response better, and from other agencies as well. It's not just a sort of policing issue, but yeah.
We have a line here, so I'm going to start with you and then come that way. I just want to rephrase it again for the listener and for those that cannot hear. So the question is, would the response, or potentially could the response be differently? Was there a challenge because of Evidence's accent and the fact that she wasn't necessarily British born? Do you see any difference in disparity there between those two concepts?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't speak to specifics really, but I would say that in the work that we did a few years ago, where we heard from families about their specific experiences, one of the things that we did hear was about accents. And linked to sort of race and ethnicity, but also linked to, like, for example, we heard from a couple of families who had come to the UK from like Eastern Europe and who didn't have a sort of British accent. So that is something that we've heard. I think class is an interesting point around missing in general. And actually, I said a bit earlier, there's such limited research and evidence around missing. And one of the things that I literally don't think there's anything about, I certainly don't know anything that exists about it, is around class, both in terms of socioeconomic links with missing, and then in terms of a response that somebody might get linked to socioeconomic sort of status and things like that. But yeah. Yes.
So the question is, what role does the media and social media play in helping to solve some of these cases? What role do podcasts play in that, as well as the national media, I assume, as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the media is a really difficult issue. So definitely the media has a bias towards young white women. There's research from the States and from here that really clearly evidences that missing young white women will get more media attention. There's more engagement on social media around appeals that are young white women having gone missing. Yeah, there's definitely something around media. And we're working at the moment in the charity to develop media guidance that we're going to be working to ask agencies, sort of news agencies in the UK to sign up to, about sensitive and good reporting of missing cases. On the flip side, in terms of the media, something that we always have to keep in mind is that the media is around a person as well. So obviously media can garner a lot of attention and it can have an impact in finding the person. Absolutely. But we've heard from a lot of missing people who have come back from being missing, and high levels of media attention have been really traumatic for them, to the extent that we've heard from people who it almost meant that they didn't actually want to return because so much information had been shared about them on social media and in national, regional media. I would always say that the balance really has to be there about the right to privacy of that person and then the impact that media could reasonably have.
So I want to paraphrase again. Sorry, Evidence, I don't mean to cut you off here, but so the first part, was there an inquest and what was the result? And then the second question, can you just tell me one more time? Okay, so the commissioner of the Met Police said that it is not institutionally racist, and you'd like to get Evidence's opinion on that. Okay, go ahead.
Of course it is.
Institutionally.
Racist, yes, of course. I mean, it's quite obvious because of the color of my son. The other thing is, of course, we are going through the inquest. So at the moment, we've done a pre, so we're still going through it. I can't say too much at the moment until we get to the end of what we are. It's an inquest that is going on. And it's open to the public. So if you check on the billboard, you see it. So you can, it's open to everybody to come. I think the final one. So it's on the 24th. Please come along. It's July, on the 24th, So it's open to the public to come.
Got one here, and then I'll come back to you two, okay? So the question was, what should the police have done in Evidence's case? What is the standard process and procedure that should have been followed so that people are aware if any of their loved ones go missing, what they need to be looking for?
Yeah, so if you have someone who's an adult who goes missing, they should be reported to the police. And each case will be taken on its own specific circumstances. So the police should initially take all the information, like the call taker should take lots of different bits of information, and then they'll make that risk assessment decision. And based on that risk assessment decision, that sort of dictates the whole rest of the response. At the moment, there isn't any sort of agreed upon sort of standards for how the police should be interacting with missing people's loved ones and the reporting person. So a lot of that might depend force to force and on the specific circumstances. At the minute, we at Missing People, we're trying to develop a charter, which will be, I think it's about sort of 9 principles that we're going to be asking police forces to sign up to, which will be around their engagement with families, what families can expect. Because at the moment, there isn't anything really agreed about that. What I would say, similarly to before, I think if you think you're not getting the response that you would expect, to get in touch with like missing people and get someone else involved to advocate for you, or to let you know how you can maybe advocate for yourself. Yeah. But yeah, there's not specific things at the moment.
So we only have 2 minutes, so we have time for one, maybe two questions. Do you want to rock, paper, scissors, or? So the question is, what was the new legislation that Jane was referring to about the financial issues that people who have missing loved ones face?
Yeah, so it is called guardianship. The legislation might just be called the Guardianship Act, but its short form is Claudia's Law. So it was spearheaded by Claudia Lawrence's dad, Peter Lawrence, and she went missing a number of years ago now and is still missing. And they spearheaded this campaign to get new legislation that enabled families to take control of their loved ones' sort of financial affairs. So yeah, it's called guardianship.
Do you think the answer would be 30 seconds or less for your question? So the question is, Evidence, what would you like to see in terms of, do you agree that community policing is where we need to go? And what would you like to see come out of that if you do agree?
Yeah, I think I would like to see them engage more in our community, especially in ethnic minority. Engage more, understand it more, because I think there's a lot of lack of understanding in that area at the moment. I went to Hendon a few days ago, and I literally I did not see 2 or 3 Black people in there. They're all doing their passing. I think it's called passing. I was quite disappointed. I said, oh, this is not happening. What's happening? What's going on? So there needs to be more engagement in our community. And if that's the only way community can be safe again, it's perfect. So I do welcome that initiative if that's to go on.
Good. I want to thank my panelists. I want to thank Evidence for being vulnerable and sharing your story. Round of applause for Evidence. And I want to thank Jane. Jane, how can people find more about missing people?
So online, www.missingpeople.org.uk, or all of our contact numbers are 116000. So phone, text is 116000, emails 116000 at missingpeople.org. Yeah, so.
Thank you all for listening and engaging with us.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.